factoring. We're going to look at different ways to factor today, and I'm going to be showing you two problems, one from section 5.5 and one from section 5.6. And I tried to pick some of the more difficult problems to show you. The first thing you need to know is the different types of factoring. Well, you can do GCF factoring, you can do trial and error, which is for trinomials, you can do difference of squares, difference of cubes, sum of cubes, and you have factor by grouping. This is an example of a factor by grouping problem because there's more than 3 terms. With factor by grouping, you have to have 4 or more. What does it mean to factor by grouping? Well, you literally group the first 2 and group the second 2. And we're going to treat these like 2 separate problems. So if I look at just the first group, what does x cubed plus 3x squared have in common? Well, they both have an x, and when you're doing GCF type factoring, you pull out the smallest, or the highest that will divide into both of them. In this case, it's going to be x squared. They don't have any numbers in common, so there's not going to be any numbers we pull out. How do I go from x squared to x cubed? Well, I need to multiply by x. How do I go from x squared to 3x squared? Well, I multiply by 3. Okay, that's the first part of factor by grouping. Now we're going to do the exact same thing with the second part. What does negative 4x and negative 12 have in common? Well, for one thing, they both have a negative, so we can pull that out. They don't have any variables in common, but they do have a number in common. What's the largest number that will divide into 4 and 12? 4. How do I go from negative 4 to negative 4x? I multiply by x. How do I go from negative 4 to negative 12? I multiply by positive 3. Now, if you've done factor by grouping correctly, what you see in parentheses should be exactly the same. If it's not, either you've done something wrong in your factoring, or it's not possible to factor by grouping, which does happen sometimes. Now, you're going to get your 2 answers, or the 2 parts to your answer, which are factors, which means multiplication, by doing the following. The first factor is going to come from your GCFs, going from left to right. So my first GCF is x squared. My second GCF was negative 4. The other factor is the part that's in your parentheses, or the part that repeats, and you only write it once. Now typically you would be finished here when you do factor by grouping, but occasionally you'll be able to factor a little bit further. In this case we can, because this term is called a difference of 2 squares. Now if you remember how difference of squares factors, it's going to give you 2 more terms, and I'm going to bring down this x plus 3 at the end because I'm not going to do anything else to that. The way it factors is the square root of x squared, which is x, the square root of 4, which is 2, and then 1 is a plus and 1 is a minus, and it does not matter which one you put first. This is my answer for this problem. A lot of people say, well, how do you know when you're finished? Well, your goal is to try to make each factor linear, which means to the first power. Sometimes that's not possible. For example, if this had been a plus 4 here, then you would have been finished at this step because we don't have a formula for sum of squares, only difference of squares. Alright, the next type of problem we're going to do is a trinomial where we've got to do some trial and error or guess and check type thing. Okay, here's my next problem. 5y cubed minus 45y squared plus 70. Well, first of all, notice that they all have something in common, so always do GCF before you do anything else. They all have a 5 because 5 will divide evenly into 5, 45, and 70. And all 3 of them have at least one y. So that's my GCF, and that's what I'm going to put on the outside of my parentheses. Now, how do I go from 5y to 5y cubed? Well, I'm going to multiply by y squared. How do I go from 5y to 45y squared? I'm going to multiply by negative 9y. How do I go from 5y to 70y? I'm going to multiply by 14. So this is my new almost finished factored problem. I pulled out my GCF. Okay, now I'm going to do trial and error with the middle part. Because this is a trinomial and now there's nothing else in common, we do this trial and error type approach. A lot of people will show the butterfly method, which is what I'm going to show you now. To me, it just looks like an X. Okay? But what you do is you're going to put the number that you're going to add, you want it to multiply to give you this number. Okay, so I'm going to put this little multiplication symbol here. And you want it to add to give you the middle number. Okay, well, what two factors can I multiply to get 14 that will add to give me -9? Well, -2 and -7 will work. -2 plus -7 is -9, and -2 times -7 is +14. They call this the butterfly method. I call it the X method. So these are my two factors, what you're going to get in the middle. So I'm going to bring down my 5y, write my two parentheses. Whatever this is, whatever variable this is here, always goes first, and it's the square root of that term. And then I just copy these two numbers over here. So one is a -2, and one is a -7. And again, it doesn't matter what order you put them in. So this is my answer for this particular trinomial.